everyone, it's me, Granny Willow, and my good friend, Everest. Today we're here and we're going to be doing some storytelling, and today's story is about my family history. And Everest and I, we go all over northern Manitoba and Saskatchewan and pretty much where anybody invites us, and we tell stories, cultural stories and teachings, and we also teach hoop dancing, and that's a lot of fun. So behind me you'll see my hoops. Today we hope to be able to, what do we hope to be able to do, Everest? Move mountains, Granny Willow. We do. We hope to be able to move mountains, open people's hearts and minds, and hope you enjoy the truths that come out of our story. So Everest, can you have a seat while Granny Willow tells her story? Okay, you can. All right, here we go. We'll set you down here and you can watch Granny Willow. All right, so today I'm going to tell a story about my own great-great-grandfather. His name was David Collins, and he played a really big role in Flin Flon. So you're going to hear that story today. So one of the first things I'm going to say is that in my role as a storyteller, I know that I don't stand alone. I have my ancestors that are with me. They're standing behind me. And today I hope that, especially because I'm telling the story of my great-great-grandfather, I hope that he is with me and that some of his thoughts can be shared today in the story that I'm telling of him. I call on bear courage, one of the sacred 7 teachings that I teach about. We all have courage within us, and today I'm calling on that courage to be able to tell this story. With the 7 sacred teaching of courage comes the 7 sacred teaching of truth. Today I hope to be able to share my family's historical truths, and Turtle will help me with that. Whoever holds the eagle feather speaks the truth, and today I hold the eagle feather. In 1915, where this story takes place, I'm not too sure how much of a voice that David Collins had, and we'll find out a little bit more about that as I tell my story. I will be the voice today, which brings me to this. This is a raven, and as you can see on the raven's beak, there is a cloth on his beak, a white cloth. I had a dream a few years back, and in my dream, Raven was in my house, and it looked like Raven was not alive. And I was quite distressed when I saw Raven, and I went and I picked him up, and I was pretty sad too. I thought, oh my goodness, you're not alive. And so I went to the door. I was going to bury him, and I went to the door, I opened the door, and as I held him, I took off the white shredded cloth that was tied around his beak. And as I took it off, Raven started to come alive, came to life, and I was happy. So I let Raven go, and he flew out. He flew away out the door, and I was happy. Although it was a good ending, I was still quite concerned when, oh, I shouldn't put that on Raven's beak again. I was still quite concerned. So I talked to my elder, and my elder said, no, Kelly, don't worry. That's a good sign. You, my dear, you now have your voice and you can speak. And pretty much ever since that dream, I have been speaking a lot more. I never had a problem with speaking before, but I seem a little bit more intentional in what I say. So I'm thankful for that gift. Now, along with that gift comes responsibility. So I do take my role very seriously when I tell my stories and speak my truths. So When I was a little girl, I traveled alongside my grandmother and my parents, and we would drive down the dustiest roads, and we would go and we would talk to elders that knew of David Collins, knew the story. So my parents would record what they had to say on the old tape recorder, the old cassettes, and I would sit there and listen. I was about 9 years old. My grandmother was about 9 years old when she remembers the stories of her grandpa. And so I was there with them, and I would see the elders, and they would all be bundled up in blankets or sweaters, and they seemed so old. I was little though, so maybe they seemed extra old. And Granny would translate because they couldn't speak English. So she would translate Cree to English so it could be recorded on the recorder. And they would write notes down, and the elders would mark that they had said those words with an X because many of them couldn't write or speak English. That means a lot. It really does. I remember being along with them. I remember when they would advocate for David Collins, trying to bring some justice to what he discovered and what he deserved. I was there when they took down the old wooden cross off of his grave and replaced it with a new headstone on his grave site, declaring that he was the founder of the Flin Flon mine on one side of it. And I could see their pride and their smiles and their joy because they had advocated for this man that wasn't given his due. I remember that so well. I remember when a street was named after David Collins in my town. I really remember when my dad would write letters and advocate for David Collins' truths. I'd fall asleep to the pounding of the typewriter keys. That's just embedded in my memory, and I would often think as an adult, wow, he was just pouring so much hope into the truths for David Collins. So all of that was given to me as a gift, I believe, as a young child. And like I said, I don't take it lightly. I'm meant to be part of this story, even though at the time as a child I probably just wanted to be swimming in the lake and not listening to any of this. But there's a reason. There's a reason for everything. So I think of my great-great-grandpa David Collins. I think of him walking on his trapline. On his trapline. This is where the story began, on his trapline. This is the Canada Department of Mines Geological Survey, Summary Report 1930 Part C. This can be found on the internet. I'll just put it up there. That's where I found it. But my dad had also done this work ahead of time, so I knew it existed. Here's the part that I'm going to read down there that's tabbed off. I'm just going to quote some of this here. So Flin Flon. In 1915, Creighton, Mosier, and Dion and Associates were prospecting near the lake now known as Flin Flon, and so it is reported Mr. Thomas Creighton noticed sulfide-stained rock on the east shore of the lake. As these men were prospecting for gold-bearing quartz, little or no attention was paid this body of iron-stained rock. Later, in the summer, an Indian named David Collins, whose trapping ground was about Flin Flon Lake, showed these prospectors specimens of copper ore, and later accompanied them to Flin Flon Lake and showed them the spot from which the specimens had been collected. The ground was then staked and surface trenching was commenced. And there's more in that paragraph, but that's all I'm going to read for today. So I think of David Collins on his trapline. That was his livelihood. And I think of his need, because it's documented in another story that he had come into an area where prospectors were known to be, and he had come in and he was looking for some because he knew that he needed a partnership. Because back in 1915, if we remember, Indigenous people often didn't have a voice. Now, were they even considered human? So we can see that David Collins needed some help, and he was a smart man. My granny, who knew him, recalls all of the Money Rock. David Collins was stated to have come into the area saying Money Rock, Lake Athapapaskow. He knew his rocks. This was found, not this, but Money Rock was found on his trapline that he walked every day. Now, that Money Rock, he needed that partnership. So he met up with the prospectors. He shook hands, made his deal. Now that handshake in northern Manitoba in 1915, that handshake was everything. That was life. That was a bond. That was truth. And what did I say about truth? Truth. Now, with truth comes integrity. Now, David Collins and his Money Rock. He was promised, well, he was given some flour. He was given some bulk tea. He was given lard, and he was promised sugar. Now, he never did receive his sugar. My granny remembers that, and she told me that. He was still waiting for his sugar when he died. Now, if there was to be value from that Money Rock, David Collins would receive some of that value. Did it have any value? Oh, let me tell you about the value it did have. In 2015, I was part of a committee with local historians and family members and friends that all came together. And in 2015, the amount that this Money Rock came, like the Money Rock that came about from this Money Rock was $14 billion. And we know that David Collins received a little bit of flour and lard and tea, valued at about $6.30 in about 1960 when my granny retold the story. So as an adult, oftentimes I would stop by and give my respects to at his grave. And on there, I noticed a Bible verse, and I thought, I wonder what the Bible verse means. I didn't remember. I always remember my parents saying, "Don't worry, Kelly, he'll receive his riches in heaven." And I thought, well, maybe it had something to do with that. So I looked it up, and it says pretty much that no matter what we do on this earth, we can do all kinds of things, What counts is love. If we don't have love, that handshake, that honor, that integrity, we don't have anything. So, David Collins, I hope that you're resting well. And as your great-great-granddaughter, my goal is to share your truths and to honor you in a way that I don't think you were honored when you were on this earth. So, hope I can do that for you. That's my promise. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope we can move mountains.